99% of what they told you about medieval life is a lie. It's the foundational deception, a story crafted to make you believe your ancestors were ignorant, mud-caked simpletons, so you'd feel disconnected from them and dependent on the official record. But the truth is far more dangerous. It is the year 1250, and you are not stupid. Dawn is a smear of gray through the cracks in the wattle wall. You aren't listening for the rooster. You're listening for the heavy, rhythmic tread of the parish reeve's boots. They knew that a people connected, clean, and clear-headed are a people impossible to control. The loss was a strategic masterstroke of oppression. By taking away the one place you could meet as equals, they shattered your community into 1,000 isolated, fearful family units. They left you shivering in your own homes, suspicious of your neighbors, your world shrinking to the size of your own hearth. It was never about hygiene. It was about power. Now, as another gust of wind rattles the shutters and brings a fresh wave of the town's filth, you stare into the dark. The hypocrisy has the metallic taste of cold iron. The mason taps another section of the blueprint, a cross-section of the Great Hall. He explains in his clipped, spare way how the concave surfaces and angled walls are not just for strength. They are an acoustic weapon. They are engineered to catch the priest's voice, to amplify it, to give it a resonant, booming quality that seems to come not from a man, but from the heavens themselves. It is designed to make his words feel like supernatural authority, a physical weight pressing down on your conscience. The clean, deliberate marks of a body being stripped of its flesh. This wasn't monstrous evil. It was a form of horrific reason. It's a truth so dark, it was systematically scrubbed from the record. Just as modern governments classify casualty numbers or hide the desperate acts of citizens in a collapsed state. To admit that God's flock turned on itself was to admit the ultimate failure of authority, both earthly and divine. It was to admit that in the face of annihilation, the laws of heaven are no match for the laws of an empty stomach. To the Reeves men, this forest is a place of shadows and fear, a border to be patrolled. To you, it is a cathedral of secrets. You see the path they cannot, the one branch on the ancient oak bent just so, pointing north. The 3 gray stones piled atop a mossy stump, a sign of safe passage. This is a language written in the landscape, a code invisible to the uninitiated. This is the law of the Greenwood. They tell children stories of Robin Hood, a fairy tale of men in green tights, a comforting lie. The other villagers who come here will hear it too, and the story will be told over every hearth by nightfall. The fear will do more to protect the Lord's deer than any forest warden. But here is the secret, the truth that is buried deeper than any body in the churchyard. 99% of people who kneel on this stone, who feel the awe and terror of a voice from heaven, will never know that they are being lied to. Recent analysis of the biographies of saints, their hagiographies, reveals a shocking pattern. He knows you understand. He did this for you. He just showed you the secret architecture of the entire kingdom in a 3-second juggling trick. As the applause dies down, he gives a low, mocking bow. As he straightens up, he catches your gaze again, and his lips form a single silent word. A name. Not a place, but a person. The Lock. You realize with a sickening lurch that the jester's gambit wasn't just showing you the key, it was telling you which door to use it on. Your heart hammers against your ribs. a frantic drum in the damp quiet. The metallic taste of fear coats your tongue. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your village blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard, your fingernails scraping against the rough wood, is not a gold coin or a stolen trinket. It's something infinitely more deadly. A single, fire-blackened page wrapped in slick oilcloth. This page is forbidden knowledge. It holds no prayers. You wonder what other beautiful, dangerous truths they called sin just to bury them. And you feel a cold dread creep up your spine as you realize the grimiest thing in your world isn't your skin. It's the lies you've been forced to live in. Then his finger moves to the plans for the enormous rose window. The placement, the angle, the specific density of the colored glass, all calculated to filter the morning light, to scatter it into a hazy, ethereal glow. It's meant to create a sense of the otherworldly, to disorient you, to make you more open to suggestion, to strip away your certainty and replace it with awe. It isn't divine grace, it's sensory warfare. And in that moment, you see the modern world reflected in this medieval parchment. This is the same principle of control, refined over centuries. The sound you hear, scraping across the centuries, is the sound of fingernails on a coffin lid, the sound of history trying to bury a truth that refuses to stay dead. You huddle by the dying embers of your fire, the ghost of the forbidden feast, a warm knot in your gut. You are alive. That is the only fact that matters. And as you stare out through a crack in the wall, you see a flicker of light in another hut, and then another. A terrible, silent communion settles over the village. The truth is something far more dangerous and powerful. The forest is a free zone, the heart of a vast, illegal network that keeps the villages from starving. It is a direct act of rebellion against the artificial world the nobles have built. A world where they claim ownership of every deer, every tree, every rabbit, creating hunger where there should be plenty. Here, that claim is a joke. You hear the low murmur of voices ahead, and the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat hits you. The intoxicating, forbidden scent of poached venison. It shows how these divine revelations so often served brutally earthly ends. You look from the slot in the wall to Father Thomas, standing by the altar, pretending to pray, but you see his eyes watching you. You now understand the whispers you overheard between him and the reeve last night. This isn't piety. It's a conspiracy. The woman in the wall, the anchoress, is not a conduit for the divine. She is a weapon of psychological warfare. They took her, but devout girl, and walled her up for life. They told her it was the path to sainthood. And that behind that door is a man who will have to be broken for the truth to finally come free. It shows diagrams of crop rotation systems so advanced they won't be recorded by sanctioned scholars for another 200 years. It has symbols, a secret alphabet of the common folk, marking which streams are poisoned by the tannery runoff, and which tax collectors can be bribed with a hen. This is a library born of the earth, not the pulpit. What they don't want you to know is that peasant was never a synonym for idiot. The nobles say your people cannot read. It is the greatest lie they ever told, a secret they buried under centuries of Latin scripture and sealed wax. They believe literacy is the careful curve of a quill on vellum. They are wrong. You see the real words everywhere. Today, the rain makes them stand out, dark against the damp gray stone. You run your finger over the cross carved deep into the bridge post, a simple ward against bad luck, or so they think. On the tavern door, a daisy wheel, its petals overlapping in a perfect, endless circle. It's in the deliberately confusing, labyrinthine layouts of government buildings designed to make you feel lost and dependent on their authority. It's in the imposing, sterile facades of corporate headquarters, all glass and steel, built to intimidate and communicate a power you can never hope to match. They are physical manifestations of a power structure, a story told in stone and steel that says, "We are large and you are small." It's an ancient lie, just given a new language. As the mason begins to roll the blueprint back up, his hand pauses. You understand that the silence isn't just from weakness anymore. It is the heavy, shared silence of souls who have tasted the unthinkable to see another sunrise. The great, unholy secret is safe in the dark. For now, the sound of a knife being sharpened on a whetstone scrapes through the quiet, a rhythmic, metallic shk, shk that is both the promise of a full belly and the threat of a quick death. This is the medieval counter-economy, a secret that, if it ever got out, would shatter the fragile power of the lords. It is the ancestor of every gray market, every encrypted network that operates in the shadows of power today. Here, value is real. They starve her, keep her in perpetual darkness, until the lines between this world and the next dissolve into hallucinatory fog. And into that fog, the priest whispers his own messages. He feeds her the fears and agendas of the powerful, and she, in her broken, desperate state, gives them back as prophecies from God. It's the medieval version of using a manufactured crisis, of putting a carefully selected expert on the news to stoke public fear and push a specific policy. They have turned a human soul into a mouthpiece. The symbol was never a single secret. It was the signature of a world they tried to erase. The peasants' farming techniques, the outlaws' freedom, the Templars' financial system, they were never separate conspiracies. They were threads of a single, vibrant tapestry. A decentralized, knowledgeable, and interconnected society that was dangerously close to making the entire feudal system obsolete. The page you found wasn't from one book, the Codex of Whispers. It was from thousands. The Codex was a metaphor for the entire body of human knowledge the church and nobility sought to control. It was a class of people with a deep, unwritten encyclopedia of survival, and the church and nobility saw that knowledge as a direct threat to their power. This wasn't a dark age of ignorance. It was an age of targeted information destruction, a historical vandalism identical to how modern institutions discredit grassroots knowledge to maintain control today. Holding this page, you feel the weight of generations. If it's found, you and your family will be erased. But if it's lost, your entire world will be swallowed by the history written by your oppressors. Your skin prickles. You feel the faint, gritty scrape of old stone and dried lichen under your nail. An ASMR whisper of a hidden world. To the lord of the manor, to the bishop in his finery, these are just the scratches of a superstitious, illiterate peasantry. To you, they are a language, a forbidden network of information, hiding in the one place they would never think to look. Everywhere. What they don't want you to know is that literacy isn't about books. It's about communication, and your people are masters of it. He points to the very corner of the parchment, half hidden in the intricate border. Tucked away, used as a maker's mark, is a small, familiar symbol. A circle intersected by a crooked line. Your breath catches in your throat. It's the same mark you saw scratched into the outlaw's door, the one the old woman whispered was a peasant's code for safe passage. It wasn't just a secret of the fields and forests. The master craftsmen, the secret keepers of forbidden geometry, they knew it too. The greatest lie ever told wasn't a spoken word. It was the silence left behind after a knife scraped across parchment, molecule by molecule, until a truth was unwritten. You stand in the deep shadows of the scriptorium, where the only warmth comes from a single tallow candle fighting against the immense, bone-deep cold of the stone. Before you, a monk's back is a hunched curve of brown wool, a study in devotion. His hand, guided by a faith you are beginning to realize is a weapon, moves with a surgeon's precision. A sack of illegal salt, painstakingly smuggled from the coast, is worth more than gold because it can preserve the meat that will keep a family alive through winter. A stolen deer is not a crime. It is justice. Information is the real currency. Which roads are watched, which tax collectors are cruelest, which lords are distracted by war. You watch a man with the haunted eyes of a fugitive exchange a whispered warning for a heel of bread and a place by the fire. He is safe here. The king's authority dissolves in the misty air between these trees. Her suffering is the ink with which they write their laws. Her voice, their weapon, whispers again, a final, trailing sigh that sounds almost like a sob. God sees all. As you rise to your feet and turn away from the wall, you catch the priest's eye. There is no holiness there, only the cold, flat satisfaction of a craftsman admiring his tool. And you are left with a new, more terrible question twisting in your gut. Does she know what she's become? Or is that the one secret they've managed to keep even from her? What they don't want you to know is the ultimate mind-blowing truth. The Dark Ages were not a historical accident. They were an achievement. It was the most successful long-term information suppression campaign in human history. They systematically demonized shared knowledge as heresy, communal living as sin, and scientific inquiry as sorcery. They burned the libraries, but they couldn't burn the knowledge from people's minds. So they started burning the people. The witch hunts, the crusades. These weren't just about religious purity. You can hear the Reeves dog barking closer now. The real question isn't just how you'll survive the day, but how this single page connects to a continent-wide conspiracy to erase a truth that could bring the whole feudal system crashing down. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Historians centuries from now will find these symbols and call them apotropaic marks. They'll label them witch marks and write papers on folk magic, convinced they were simply to ward off evil spirits. 99% of people will believe this story, because the truth is far more dangerous. These marks weren't just for keeping demons out. They were for letting people in. It was a medieval dark web, a distributed, decentralized intelligence network that no lord or bishop could ever hope to crack. You've learned to read the signs. The mason looks at you. his eyes dark with a warning that needs no words. This symbol is a thread connecting the highest and lowest rungs of society in a conspiracy of silence. And now that you've seen it, you are part of that silence too. A silence that could get you both burned. 99% of people believe men like him saved civilization, faithfully copying ancient texts and preserving the light of knowledge through a dark time. You are about to learn they were the ones who put the darkness there. You see it now, beside the pot of black oak gall ink, a smaller clay pot of sour, acidic liquid, ink remover, and next to it, the tool that does the real work, a razor-sharp knife, its edge gleaming in the unsteady light. He is not merely copying. He is performing an excision. What the nobles fear most, what they will burn villages to suppress, is this simple, devastating truth. People can survive without them. They can create their own laws, their own trade, their own justice. This hidden kingdom proves that their power is an illusion, a story they tell to keep the world in chains. And the symbol that marks the safe paths, the key to this entire world? You touch the small, crudely carved bird hanging from a leather thong around your neck. You know its shape by heart. It is the one thing that separates you from the lost. The greatest lie the church ever told wasn't about God. It was about the power hidden in your own two hands. They taught you to kneel, to pray to a distant, silent heaven for deliverance from mud, famine, and fever. But out here, where the wind bites and the sky is an iron lid, you watch a different kind of faith at work. You see an old man, his back a question mark carved from oak, guiding his plow through the stubborn earth. The air smells of damp soil and the metallic tang of coming rain. They were about silencing the last living libraries of a different way of life, erasing the memory of a world where you didn't need a king to be safe or a priest to be wise. This is the timeless blueprint of control. It's happening right now, in the faint blue light of the screen you're watching. Look at how official narratives are created and how dissenting voices are labeled misinformation. Look at how complex issues are flattened into fear-based binaries designed to divide. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. But be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. 3 interlocking circles burned into the lintel of a remote farmhouse means a safe house for an escaped serf. A small, downward-pointing chevron carved near a well warns that the water is foul, that it carries the flux. A star with 5 points, scratched into a milestone, tells you a patrol passed this way within the hour. This is the modern equivalent of activists using encrypted messaging apps, of rebels using coded memes to organize right under the nose of an authoritarian regime. How do you burn a library that's carved into the very wood and stone of the kingdom? The greatest lie ever whispered in a stone corridor is that power speaks with the clang of steel. It's a children's story, a ballad for the naive. The true weapon of the elite makes no sound at all. Your hand trembles, just for a moment, as you lift the silver goblet to your lips. The wine inside is the color of a deep bruise, and the candlelight catches on the polished surface, throwing a warped reflection of your own face back at you. Your eyes are wide. You see a ghost. Not your own, but another's. Lord Valerius. You watch as he leans over a weathered page of vellum, his left hand holding it taut. The knife comes down. You hear it before you see the result. A soft, dry, hissing sound. The sound of a razor whispering across dried animal skin. It's the most violent sound you have ever heard. The quiet, methodical murder of an idea. Flakes of dried ink and parchment dust rise like ghosts in the candlelight. The final remains of a thought that is now forbidden. What was there a moment ago? As you approach the fire, a woman with scars on her face like faded maps hands you a worn piece of meat wrapped in leaves. She doesn't ask your name. She just looks at the bird around your neck, then nods. But her eyes flicker to a new arrival huddled in the darkness, a man whose left hand is a raw, bandaged stump. He is fresh from the Lord's justice, and he is whispering about a new decree, a new hunt, not for deer, but for those who bear the sign of the bird. His knuckles are white on the worn wood, but his eyes are fixed on the end of the furrow. He isn't praying, he is working. When he reaches the edge of the field, he stops. His movements are furtive, his head turning to scan the tree line. From a leather pouch at his belt, he pulls a small, crude figure of a man, barely recognizable, shaped from river clay. You can hear the faint, wet rasp as his calloused thumb smooths its featureless face. This is his magic. The medieval peasant hiding a page of farming knowledge is the modern citizen using a VPN to see past a firewall. The witch using herbal remedies is the scientist whose research is buried for threatening a corporate patent. The system has never changed, only the technology has. The symbol survived in stories, in rituals, in the very geometry of the cathedrals themselves. A promise that knowledge, once learned, can never be truly destroyed. They lied about the past, a grand, sweeping deception that has shaped our entire world. The Church preaches that sickness is God's punishment, a darkness in your soul that only prayer and penance can cleanse. They buried this secret for 1,000 years. The real medicine was always there, in the dirt and the weeds, and they called its keepers witches. You are in Ilara's hut now. The air is thick, not with the cloying, sweet, sick incense of the deathbed, but with the living scent of drying herbs and sharp wood smoke. It's a smell of life. You watch her. This village healer, the priest calls a heretic. How do you silence a language that has no voice? Then the memory hits you. It's a physical blow, a rush of ice through your veins that makes the damp chill of the air seem warm by comparison. The symbol, the one from Ilara's door, hastily painted over. The one you found on the corner of the burnt page, the page you now carry tucked against your skin. It's not just a doodle. It's not a family crest. It's a word in this silent, secret language. Your world shrinks to the size of that single terrifying shape. You see him now as you saw him then at the midwinter feast, his face a mask of bloated confidence. He was a boar of a man, loud and red-faced, a minor but ambitious rival to your own master. He had laughed, a booming sound that shook the tapestries, and drained his cup in a single arrogant swallow. Hours later, you saw him again. He was no longer red. His skin had taken on the waxy, yellowed pallor of old parchment. New multispectral imaging has shown us the specters hiding beneath the ink. That patch of ghostly pale vellum he now smooths with a pumice stone was perhaps a pagan poem celebrating the sensuous curve of the earth, the turning of the wheel of the year. In an hour, it will be a hymn to a martyred saint. A few pages over, the record of a local village council's democratic vote, a testament to the power of the common man. is scraped into oblivion, replaced by the unassailable text of a royal decree. Suddenly, the venison in your hands tastes of ash and fear. The warm fire feels like a beacon, and you realize the law of the greenwood is about to be tested by the law of the king, written in fire and steel. He digs a small hole with his fingers, the dark soil caking under his nails, and gently places the clay figure inside, burying it like a seed. A golem, a protector, a silent, sightless guardian for the crop that stands between his family and starvation. The priest would call this idolatry, a one-way path to hellfire. He'd thunder from the pulpit about graven images and demonic pacts. But you see the truth. The charm isn't for a god. It's for him. It begs the final, terrifying question. What else are they lying about now? Her hands, stained with the milky blood of dandelions and the deep green of crushed yarrow, move with a certainty the priest's prayers could never possess. She takes a strip of pale willow bark and begins to grind it in a heavy stone mortar. The sound is a rhythmic thump, scrape, a quiet heartbeat against the terror in the room. 99% of people don't know this, but Ilara is crushing the source of salicylic acid. She is making aspirin 600 years before it will be patented and sold. The symbol you carry is a key. But a key to what? A key to a safe house? A warning? A weapon? You're standing in the middle of a conspiracy woven into the fabric of the world. And you've just realized you're holding one of its most important threads. What happens when the authorities finally realize the graffiti they've been ignoring for 100 years is actually a blueprint for rebellion? And what happens when they find out you're the one holding the key? A foul, sweet stench, like rotting apples, clung to his breath as he gasped for air, his eyes rolling back in his head. The priest, draped in silk woven with gold thread, made the sign of the cross and spoke of a divine illness, a swift and righteous judgment from God for some hidden sin. But as the priest droned on about humility, you saw the dead man's heir, a boy no older than 20, try to suppress a smirk. It was a flicker of an expression, there and gone, but it burned itself into your memory. A detailed diagram of a Roman aqueduct, a marvel of engineering, is flayed from existence to make room for a treatise on the categorization of demons. This isn't about saving parchment. This is a systematic, coordinated campaign to create ignorance. What they don't want you to know is that the Dark Ages were not an accident of history. They were an act of sabotage, a deliberate severing of the medieval world from its heretical, Roman, and pagan past. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. What they don't want you to know is that this act, this tiny rebellion, is a form of power they can never control. 99% of people believe medieval magic was about casting spells and summoning spirits. The reality was quieter, more desperate, and infinitely more human. It was about creating tangible hope in a world that offered none. This wasn't a plea to an unseen deity. It was a direct, hands-on intervention in one's own fate. It was an act of taking control. And in this age, control is the most dangerous heresy of all. The priest demonizes her from his pulpit on Sundays, his voice echoing off the cold stone, warning of damnation. But tonight, in the desperate dark, it is his own wife who kneels on the packed earth floor, her face a mask of raw fear. It is his son, Thomas, who burns on the cot, his breath a shallow, rattling thing in his small chest. The mother's faith has run dry, leaving only the metallic taste of fear. She has come to the one person who offers not promises of the next life, but a chance to stay in this one. What they don't want you to know is that the charges were a ghost story, a tale told to frighten children and keep kings in power. They speak of a demonic head named Baphomet, of spitting on the cross, of heresies so vile they curdled a soul. It's a spectacular lie, and 99% of people still believe it. The truth is infinitely more dangerous and far more modern. You lean closer across the scarred wooden table, the tavern's cacophony a shield for the words being spoken. The merchant's voice is a dry rasp, smelling of cheap ale and fear. What they don't want you to know is that this was not God's work, it was science. 99% of people believe a rival is dispatched with a dagger in a dark alley or an axe on the battlefield. That is the brute's way. The powerful have a quieter, more elegant art, a forbidden knowledge that circulates in secret, copied by hand in hushed scriptorians, bound in unmarked leather. You've seen whispers of it. A page from the infamous Liber Divininus, the Book of Poisons, tucked inside a book of Holy Scripture. It's the exact same tactic you see today when a new regime topples statues, or a political party rewrites school textbooks to fit a comfortable narrative. The most effective way to control the present is to meticulously edit the past. They are building a prison for the mind, and these quiet, cold scriptoriums are its factories. The air tastes of iron, animal hide, and something else, the metallic tang of absolute control. They have an army of scribes, an ocean of ink, and the authority of God to create their lie. The man from the Caliphate of Cordoba slides the object from its oilcloth wrapping. It doesn't belong here, in this damp cellar that smells of sour wine and fear. It is a disc of gleaming brass, intricate and alien, catching the single flame of your tallow candle and throwing golden ripples across the stone. He calls it an astrolabe. You've heard whispers of such things, devices of brass and diabolical calculation, born in the sun-scorched lands to the south, where men read the stars instead of the saints. The priest says they are demon-forged mirrors that steal men's souls. You suddenly understand the strange archaeological finds modern historians whisper about. The bent pins hammered into the walls of cottages to ward off a witch's curse. The single, worn-out shoes sealed within chimneys to trip evil spirits trying to sneak inside. These weren't superstitious flukes. They were a universal secret language of defiance. Each buried charm, each hidden shoe, was a declaration. My life is my own. My fate is in my hands. This is the secret the powerful have always tried to suppress in every era. Ilara ignores the woman's silent tears. She is focused, a scholar in a library of leaf and root. She moves to a dark, damp corner of the hut, to a loaf of bread she has left to the creeping shadows. It is furred with a dusty, blue-green mold. You watch, holding your breath, as she carefully scrapes a pinch of the growth into a small clay pot, mixing it with honey into a dark, sticky paste. This is the ultimate heresy. She is unknowingly harnessing penicillin. He isn't talking about faith. He's talking about finance. His finger traces a wet ring of condensation. Forget God, he whispers, and the air grows cold. This was about debt. The Knights Templar, he explains, weren't just soldiers. They were the world's first globalist bankers. They invented a system that terrifies kings to this day, the credit note. A man could deposit a fortune in a Jerusalem preceptory, and with a coded slip of parchment, withdraw it in Paris. No caravans of gold to be robbed. No weight to slow you down. Just trust. It wasn't a collection of crude folk remedies. It was a textbook of toxicology, a clinical study of death, recipes for arsenic, distilled from minerals until it became a fine white powder, tasteless in wine. Instructions for concentrating the soul-stealing oils of nightshade and hemlock. It was a sophisticated shadow industry that kept bloodlines pure and threats neutralized. This is the medieval version of a modern Black Ops campaign. It's not just about killing an enemy. It's about erasing the crime itself, wrapping it in the sacred cloak of divine will. But in the pocket of your tunic, you feel the brittle edges of a single, fire-scorched page, a fragment of an original they missed. And you know, with a terror that feels like hope, that their perfect deception has a flaw. You just have to find where else the ghosts are still screaming beneath the surface. He pushes it across the rough-hewn table. Touch it. His voice is a low rasp, thick with an accent that marks him as an outsider, a man who has seen cities you can only dream of. Your hand trembles as you reach out. The metal is cold, heavy, and unnervingly smooth against your calloused fingertips. It's covered in a spiderweb of lines and symbols, some in the familiar script of the church, but others in the flowing, graceful curves of Arabic, the language of infidels and scholars. They belittle the power you find within yourself because it is a power they can no longer sell you. They package mindfulness into expensive apps. They brand self-reliance as a subscription service, because a person who can forge their own hope from mud and intention is a person who no longer needs a king or a bishop to tell them how to live. The old man finishes his work, pats the earth flat, and continues his plowing. The simple rhythm, a defiance against the chaos of the world. To the church, this is a foul corruption, proof of a pact with rot and decay. To an infected wound, it is a miracle that can turn back the tide of death. This was the knowledge they had to destroy. This was the direct challenge to their power. Just as a modern pharmaceutical company has been accused of suppressing a cheaper, natural remedy to protect a multi-billion-dollar patent, the medieval church demonized folk medicine to maintain its absolute monopoly on healing, and therefore its control over life and death. A global network of fortified banks, run by the most feared warriors on earth. They became unimaginably powerful, not through the sword, but through the ledger. King Philip IV of France, a man they called the Fair, was a king only in name. In reality, he was a debtor, and his biggest creditor was the Templar Order. He owed them a fortune that could fund a crusade for 100 years. What they don't teach you is that when the powerful owe too much, they don't pay. They change the rules. You destroy your rival. You officially deny everything, and you let the public believe the simple, palatable lie. It's a cleaner kind of murder, one that leaves no blood on the floor, only fear in the hearts of anyone else who might dare to challenge the established order. It's the ultimate expression of their hypocrisy, to preach of God's mysterious ways while practicing a very precise and earthly chemistry of destruction. A sudden chill crawls up your spine, colder than the dungeon stone beneath your feet. What they don't want you to know is that the most dangerous idea in the world isn't a weapon. It's the thought that you are equal to the person who rules you. You are a long way south. The air is different here, thick with the scent of lavender and sun-baked earth, a world away from the damp chill of the north. The stories that brought you here were whispers, carried on the wind by refugees with hollowed-out eyes. They spoke of a world turned upside down, of a faith that didn't demand gold or fear, only kindness. They called this the Dark Ages to make you believe that all light had vanished. 99% of people still believe that lie. They believe science and reason simply fell asleep, replaced by superstition. But knowledge didn't fall asleep. It was gagged, bound, and buried alive. It is not magic, the traveler says, seeing the fear in your eyes. He turns a delicate, lace-like dial on its face. You hear the faint, metallic whisper of the reed turning over the plate. A sound as precise and clean as a breaking icicle. It is a map, a clock, a key. And as you watch him, a cold electric realization floods through you, rearranging everything you thought you knew. The symbol, the strange recurring sigil you have been chasing through forgotten texts and whispered legends, the one that felt like a map, you were wrong. It isn't a map, it's a tool. It is the ultimate expression of this forbidden folk magic, a charm that doesn't just protect a single field from blight, but an entire world of knowledge from being erased. It's not meant to be read, it's meant to be used. Historians hid this for centuries, preferring the simple story of faith and ignorance. But they can't hide from the dead. Recent archaeological analysis of medieval dental plaque from sites like Dalheim, Germany, reveals the truth in microscopic detail. The chemical signatures of these forbidden plants are there, preserved in the teeth of the dead, a silent, damning testimony against the official narrative. The stakes are absolute, a choice no parent should have to make. To be healed by Alara is to risk your eternal soul, but to trust the priest is to risk your child's last breath. Philip couldn't default on the most powerful military financial institution on the planet, but he could destroy them. He manufactured the heresy charges, a brilliant, terrifying piece of political theater. It's the medieval blueprint for every financial cover-up that followed. When the system is about to collapse under the weight of its own corruption, you don't fix the crime. You find a scapegoat. You create a monster so hideous that the public begs you to burn it, distracting them while you quietly wipe the slate clean. Your gaze falls upon the embroidered sigil on the sleeve of the man sitting across the table. The symbol you've been tracking for weeks, the one you've seen carved into message drops and pressed into wax seals. You always thought it was just a family crest, a stylized flower. But now, in the flickering light, you see it for what it truly is. Your breath catches in your throat, a sharp, dry rasp. It's not just any flower. It's the five-petaled, hooded bloom of aconite, wolfsbane. In the Languedoc, they called them the bons hommes, the good Christians. In Rome, they had another name for them, a cancer to be carved from the body of Christendom with fire and steel. You sit across from a woman whose hands tremble as she works a simple loom, the rhythmic thump and clack of the shuttle, a frail defense. He shows you how to align the rule with a marking for the sun. Here, he points with a tanned, steady finger. This tells you the hour, not by the whim of a bell ringer, but by the turning of the world itself. He then points to the stars etched on the plate. This tells you where you are, not by the grace of God, but by the laws of the heavens. And in that moment, the true, terrifying secret reveals itself. This device isn't a threat because it's demonic. It's a threat because it's not. And as this truth settles into your bones, you feel a faint, terrifying vibration in the air, an echo of its power being wielded by someone, somewhere, right now. The mother has made her choice. Alara finishes her work, pressing a poultice to the boy's chest and giving his mother a decoction of the willow bark tea. As the woman gathers her child, her movements frantic with a fragile new hope, you see Alara bar the heavy oak door behind her. And there, carved deep into the wood on the inside, is a symbol she traces for a moment with her thumb. It is a spiral, intertwined with a thorny branch, a mark of the old ways whispered down from her grandmother. It's the same shadow play as the 2008 crash, where the world was sold a story about bad loans to poor people, while the architects of the collapse printed money to cover their own ledgers. The Templars were Philip's subprime mortgage crisis. Your stomach churns as the merchant speaks of the confessions. He describes the rack, the slow fire, the crushing of bone. Men who had faced down armies in the Holy Land were reduced to weeping animals, willing to admit to anything, to worshipping cats, to consorting with demons, just to make the pain stop. It wasn't about finding truth. The key ingredient in a poison famed for its potency, a poison that leaves no trace. A jolt of pure ice shoots through your veins. You lower your goblet, the wine untouched. The symbol isn't a warning of future treachery. It's a signature. It's the artist's mark on a finished piece of work. Your eyes dart from the sigil on his sleeve to the dark wine in your cup. Suddenly, you can smell it, a faint, almost imperceptible scent beneath the sweet aroma of fermented grapes. Something floral, something impossibly, terrifyingly familiar. They weren't like the bishops you know, fat with wine and dripping with jewels. They were thin from fasting, their robes patched and worn. They owned nothing, but what they did have, they gave freely. A healing touch, a quiet wisdom, a belief that the spark of God was in every soul, man or woman. This is the first secret they died for. In her world, a woman could be a teacher, a leader, a perfect herself, equal in spirit to any man. Imagine that. It suggests a universe that runs on gears and numbers, on predictable, mathematical laws that any learned person can understand. It whispers that the world is not a grand mystery controlled by an inscrutable God whose will can only be interpreted by a priest in a pulpit. It is a machine, a vast, beautiful, intricate machine. And a machine can be understood. It can be mastered. This is the knowledge the Church has spent centuries trying to burn. Why? Because knowledge that empowers the individual is always a poison to a system that demands blind faith. The deadliest man in this kingdom doesn't carry a sword. He carries a stick with a carved head on it, and the only blood he spills is the wine from a lord's goblet, accidentally dashed onto the ermine collar of a visiting bishop. You watch him now, a kaleidoscope of patched silk and jingling bells named Pip, tumbling across the rush-strewn floor of the great hall. The air is thick enough to chew, a foul broth of sweat, wood smoke, roasting pig, and the cloying sweetness of mead. As the firelight flickers across it, a cold dread washes over you. You recognize it. It's the same symbol from the charred corner of your own burnt page. It was about manufacturing a public story to justify the greatest heist in history. He stops, his eyes darting to the tavern door. Then he slides something across the table. It's a single silver denier, worn smooth with time. The sound it makes is a dry, metallic scrape against the rough-hewn wood. A tiny secret in the surrounding noise. Look closer, he urges. You pick it up. It's cool against your skin. And there, almost invisible to the naked eye, is a mark. And you realize the secret you've been hunting is no longer a distant conspiracy. It's in the very air you breathe, in the cup in your hand, waiting to be consumed. In a world that sees women as property, as vessels for sin, these people saw them as divine equals. It wasn't a heresy, it was a revolution. They didn't build cathedrals of stone to scrape the sky. They built communities of people who held each other up. Here is the truth. 99% of people will never learn about the Holy Wars. The Albigensian Crusade wasn't about saving souls. It was a corporate takeover dressed in a cross. The traveler tells you of men in his land and even quiet monks in these lands who study the Greeks, the Persians, the Indians. They perform surgeries. They chart the stars. They debate the very nature of light. A French churchman named Gerbert of Aurillac studied these sciences, brought numbers from the Arab world, and was so brilliant they accused him of making a pact with the devil. He was so feared, so powerful, they had no choice but to eventually make him pope. Torches spit and hiss, casting long, monstrous shadows that writhe on the tapestries behind the king. Pip the Jester concludes a bawdy song about a farmer's daughter and a particularly ambitious goat, and the hall erupts in a roar of masculine laughter. The sound is wet and deep, the grunting of well-fed beasts. But you are not watching the crowd. You are watching the king. He laughs the loudest, but his eyes, small and dark like beads of jet, never leave the fool. This is the secret 99% of people, even those in this very room, will never understand. They didn't just take away your right to be clean. They took away your right to conspire. The night wind carries the stench of the tannery and the pigsty, a familiar poison you breathe in with every shiver. You pull your thin wool cloak tighter, but the cold seeps in through the weave, a dampness that settles deep in your bones. It's on nights like this you remember your grandfather's stories, words that feel more like a dream than a memory now. He spoke of a time before the priest's whispers turned to shouts, a time of steam and laughter. A tiny symbol scratched into the coin's edge, the same symbol you've seen twice before, the one that keeps you awake at night. They didn't just move money, the merchant whispers, his voice barely audible now. They moved information, secrets. Their most valuable asset wasn't their gold, it was what they knew. And that ledger, the real one, it was never found. He leans back, melting into the shadows. The coin in your palm suddenly feels impossibly heavy, a key to a vault of truth, so damning it cost thousands of men their lives. The church told you God tests the faithful. They never told you what to do when you fail the test. You are a collection of aches, a vessel for an emptiness so profound it has its own weight. Your hut, a cage of wet mud and rotting straw, does nothing to keep out the chill that is sunk deep into your bones. For 2 years, the sky has wept without end. The rain is a constant, mournful sound, the drumming of God's disappointment on the thatch above your head. Outside, the world has dissolved into a brown, stinking slurry. The lords of the north and the bankers of the church looked south and saw not a heresy, but a viable, popular, and dangerously independent alternative to their entire system of control. Feudalism runs on a pyramid of power, with God and the king at the top, and you at the bottom, crushed under the weight of it all. The good Christians offered a different shape, a circle. The woman's shuttle stops. Her knuckles are white on the smooth wood. She speaks of Beziers. The city was full. Believers, Catholics, refugees, children. It's the medieval equivalent of a modern corporation hiding scientific data that proves their product is poison, or a government discrediting a study that contradicts a profitable war. The tactics never change, only the costumes. Your fingers trace the complex engravings, the web of celestial paths. You are looking for something specific, a symbol you were told to find, a secret passed down through whispers, a mark of your persecuted fellowship. You've seen it crudely carved on the lintels of peasant huts and etched into the foundation stones of the great cathedrals. They see an entertainer, a licensed idiot. What they don't see is the kingdom's most vital and terrifying political instrument. The jester is a pressure valve. He is the only man permitted to tell the king he has no clothes and live to see the dawn. He begins a new story, his voice pitching high and reedy, mocking a pious man so holy he can't find his own breeches in the dark, especially when they're under the queen's bed. A collective, sharp intake of breath sucks the air from the room. He called it the stew, the public bathhouse, and his eyes would mist over, not from age, but from the ghost of a warmth you've never known. He described a scent you can barely imagine, not of sweat and mud, but of clean, heated water and the sharp, honest smell of soap made from ash and tallow. They sold you the story of the unwashed masses, a convenient lie that makes you easier to pity and to rule. They want you to believe your ancestors were born in filth and died in it, ignorant and content. And he's just told you that the map to it still exists. The smell of it, the sour, deathly perfume of wheat turning to black slime in the fields, is the only thing you have to eat. You breathe your failed harvest, and the hunger inside you twists into a living creature clawing at your ribs. Prayer is a dry rasp in your throat. Your words are too thin to rise to a heaven that has turned its back. Then a sound, a soft knock at the wattle door, barely louder than the dripping rain. Fear, sharp and metallic on your tongue, comes first. No one visits after dark. When the Crusaders breached the walls, the soldiers were confused. How could they tell the heretic from the true believer? The papal legate, a man of God, gave an order that would echo in the blackest parts of history. His voice, she says, was calm, like a man ordering wine. "Kill them all," he commanded. "God will know his own." 20,000 people. The metallic taste of fear filled the air, thick as smoke. The wet, tearing sound of blades finding flesh became the city's final prayer. That slaughter wasn't an act of faith. It was a message. You thought it was a simple guild mark, a sign of the builders, the stonemasons, the illiterate who worked with their hands. But here, on this pinnacle of forbidden learning, nestled amongst the star signs and the mathematical proofs, you see it. It's small, but it's there. Unmistakable. And the world tilts on its axis. It wasn't just a mark of the peasant. It was a mark of the learned, the alchemists, the astronomers, the secret students of a world built on reason. The true keepers of the light. The symbol was not a brand of the ignorant. It was a key. It's a sound you can feel in your teeth, a dry electric crackle of 1,000 people holding their fear in their lungs. Then, the king throws his head back and bellows a laugh, and the court follows suit, a wave of relieved, frantic noise. This is the medieval equivalent of a political cartoon made flesh and blood. It's the savage satire of a late-night comedian, but the subject of the joke is sitting 10 feet away, holding the power of your life and death in his wine-stained hands. But that is the great forgetting. What 99% of people will never learn is that for centuries after the Eagle of Rome fell, the bathing culture didn't just survive, it was the secret heart of your world. It was a truth so dangerous they had to drown it. You remember your grandfather's bitter laugh, a dry, rattling sound like stones in a cup. He told you how the Lord's bailiff and the parish priest could never follow you into the steam. In the dense, swirling fog of the bathhouse, the rigid lines of the feudal world blurred and dissolved. The stones of God's new house are telling you a lie. It is a beautiful lie, a magnificent lie, but it is designed to break you, to own the very marrow of your soul. You stand before the cathedral, a beast of rock and glass, clawing its way into a nervous sky. It makes you feel exactly as you are meant to feel. Small, an insect, a whisper of dust in the presence of an eternal roar. The priest, his face smooth with certainty, calls it a monument to divine glory. There is nothing to share, nothing to trade. There is only desperation, and desperation has sharp teeth. You pull the hide flap aside. It's Alara from the next hovel. Her face is a skull in the moonlight, her eyes two large, dark pools of something you have never seen before. Not just hunger, something harder. She doesn't speak. She pushes a small, cloth-wrapped bundle into your hands. It is heavy. It is cool to the touch. Your fingers, clumsy with weakness, fumble with the knots. Inside is a piece of meat, dark red, cured with precious salt. It was the same brutal logic used 1,000 years from now when a corporate monopoly crushes a small, beloved business, or when a totalitarian state silences a protest movement. Any system that promotes genuine equality, that threatens an entrenched and profitable hierarchy, must be branded as a dangerous other and violently exterminated. They weren't killing heretics. They were killing a better idea. She pushes a small, flat stone into your palm. It's cool against your skin. Carved into its surface is a simple symbol. 2 circles, perfectly intertwined, one passing through the center of the other. And now you see it for what it truly is, glowing in the candlelight, a secret passed from one dying flame to the next. The jester operates in the space between a word and a sword, telling truths so sharp they must be wrapped in the motley of a fool to be survivable. Pip pulls 3 leather balls from his tunic, 1 black, 1 red, 1 gold, the colors of the royal house. He begins to juggle, his movements a fluid, hypnotic blur. The little brass bells stitched to his elbows and knees create a constant, chittering underscore to the lulling rhythm of the lute player in the corner. You watch, your heart a cold stone in your chest. You close your eyes and try to build it in your mind. The low stone building, thick with heat, the slosh and echo of water. You can almost feel the humid air on your skin, a blessed relief from the biting wind. In here, a knight removes his steel shell and becomes just a man with scars. A merchant, stripped of his fine silks, is just a body, soft and pale. And you, a peasant, washing the dirt from under your fingernails, are their equal. This was the real sin they couldn't tolerate. It wasn't about the flesh. He tells you the soaring arches reach for heaven, that the light bleeding through the stained glass windows is God's own grace made visible. But this is the secret they buried in the foundation, a truth mortared between the stones. It is a monument to psychological control, built with the very knowledge they hunt down and burn. Later, when the moon is a splinter in the darkness, the master mason finds you. He is a man made of the same silence as the stone he shapes. His hands speak a language older than words. The scent of it hits you like a physical blow, and a flood of saliva fills your mouth so fast you nearly choke. You haven't seen meat in a year. The Lord's deer are long gone, the rabbits hunted to extinction, the birds fled. You look up at Alara, a question forming in your mind, but it dies before it can become a sound. The look in her eyes dares you to ask. It's a look that says, "We are past questions now. We are past souls. There is only this." The symbol of two worlds, spirit and flesh, joined as one, a symbol of their faith. But you feel a cold dread creep up your spine. It's not the first time you've seen a version of this geometry. It was scratched into the wall of a hidden cell, drawn in the margins of a forbidden book you were never supposed to find. The wed isn't just about one group of forgotten people in the South. It's wider, deeper, and this woman, with the ghosts of 20,000 dead in her eyes, tells you the symbol is more than an idea. A voice in the wall is the voice of God. At least that's what you're supposed to believe. You are standing in the deepest, coldest part of the church, where the smell of old stone and damp earth overpowers the lingering ghost of incense. Your breath fogs in the air. Before you is a section of the wall that is not like the others. It is sealed, but for a tiny cross-shaped slit at waist height and a small square slot near the floor, barred with iron. This is her tomb, a tomb for the living. All your searching, the whispers in rat-infested alleys, the coded messages in prayer books, the clandestine meetings in the dead of night, it has all led you here, to this noisy, drunken spectacle. You were told the final piece was not a what, but a who. The balls climb and fall, a dizzying dance in the flickering light. They are just balls. This is just a trick. Despair begins to curdle in your stomach. But then you remember the old woman's words. He doesn't hide the truth. He throws it in your face and makes you thank him for the show. It was about the ideas. Sealed monastic ledgers, the ones written in a Latin only a handful of abbots were meant to read, tell the story the sermons never will. The church didn't close the bathhouses because of promiscuity. They closed them because they were engines of rebellion. They called them dens of sin to create a moral panic. A tactic so effective, it's still used today when the powerful want to shut down a place where the people gather and speak freely. A public square, a digital forum, a simple street corner. He leads you not into a church, but into the lean-to where the real work happens. The air thick with the scent of sawdust and beeswax. He unrolls a sheet of parchment on a trestle table. The sound it makes is a dry, dusty whisper, the voice of a forgotten secret. This is the cathedral's soul, its hidden grammar. The page is a spiderweb of geometric patterns, arcane calculations, and elegant, flowing lines that look nothing like the faith preached from the pulpit. This, he shows you, with a blunt, calloused finger, is sacred geometry. She turns and vanishes back into the relentless night. You don't hesitate. You tear at the meat with your teeth, the tough, salty fibers a shock against your gums. It's the most beautiful thing you have ever tasted. It is life. It is sin. It is survival. With every bite, a warmth spreads from your belly, pushing back the cold, silencing the gnawing beast within. You eat until it is gone, licking the salt and grease from your fingers. Your mind refusing to form the one word that echoes in the hollow spaces of your heart. It's a key, not to a place, she whispers, but to a knowledge that can unravel the world. A knowledge the church was willing to drown in blood to keep buried. Your knuckles are white as you grip the small, hard loaf of bread, your offering. With a deep breath that does little to calm the tremor in your hands, you kneel. The stone floor bites through the thin wool of your leggings. You push the bread through the lower slot. The scrape of the crust against the iron and stone is the only sound in the suffocating silence. You wait. Then it comes. A sound like dry leaves skittering across a grave slab. A whisper, so brittle you fear it might break. Force yourself to see not the objects, but the space between them, the pattern, the motion, the language of the air itself. And then it happens. For a single, impossible, silent heartbeat, the pattern locks. He isn't juggling anymore. He is painting on the air. The golden ball hangs at the very apex of its arc. The black one hovers at the bottom, and the red one streaks across the center, connecting them in a fleeting, perfect line. It's not just a shape, it's a diagram. It was in the warmth of the stews that a farmer could complain about a new tax to a sympathetic stonemason. It was here a disillusioned soldier could whisper of the Lord's cowardice to a traveling trader. Grievances were shared like cups of mulled wine. Unions were formed in hushed tones, and the heavy chains of doctrine were scrubbed from the mind as thoroughly as the grime was scrubbed from the body. The sound they truly feared wasn't the splash of water. It was the low, continuous murmur of shared discontent. An ASMR of revolution they had to silence. Knowledge stolen from the libraries of Islamic scholars, from pagan texts the church calls heretical filth. 99% of the people who will stand in awe of this building will never know that its architects, the master masons, belong to secret guilds, societies that preserve the very mathematical and engineering truths the church publicly condemns. You trace a spiraling pattern, a golden ratio spun out into the precise dimensions of a vaulted ceiling. They use this forbidden knowledge to build their centers of power, and then they send their inquisitors to burn the books it came from. This is the secret that 99% of people will never learn about the Great Famine. The official histories, written by well-fed monks in stone monasteries, speak of pious suffering, of millions turning to God as their bodies wasted away. They lie. They hide the earth-shattering truth because they could not bear it. When God is silent, humanity will find its own terrible answers. Archaeologists, centuries later, find the proof they tried to erase. In the mass graves of 1315, they find human bones. Bones with the telltale nicks and scrapes of butcher knives along the ribs. The king's law ends where the trees begin. What 99% of people will never understand is that the law that replaces it is older, wilder, and its punishments are far more immediate. You feel it in the mud that sucks at your worn leather shoes, a wet, cold kiss from the earth itself. The air is thick with the smell of damp soil and decaying leaves. A scent so primal it feels like breathing in time itself. Every snap of a twig is a question. Every hoot of an owl is an answer you can't yet decipher. The forest bleeds. You lean closer, your ear almost touching the cold, rough stone. The deer are God's, not man's. A blight will come to the thief's pot, a wasting sickness for the poacher's belly. Her words snake into your mind, chilling you more than the damp air ever could. A week ago, the Lord's reeve gave a brutal whipping to a man caught with a snare in the woods. The priest, Father Thomas, had raged from the pulpit about thieves who steal from the Lord, and thus from God himself. And now this, a divine confirmation, a holy threat. The symbol you saw carved beneath the loose floorboard in the abbot's scriptorium, the one stitched in silver thread into the dead courier's cloak. It was never a map to a place. It was a key to a network, a hidden order of power, with the king at the top, the church at the bottom, and a river of blood flowing between them. The crowd applauds, oblivious. But Pip's eyes, across the smoke and haze, find yours. The fool's manic grin is gone. In its place is an expression of cold, terrifying intelligence. He has seen you.